everybody. Me, John D. Villarreal, on the John D. Villarreal Radio Show. We are back with Professor Jim Liew is joining us from the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. And you know, we talked about a lot of different things. We're talking about entrepreneurship, talking about sales and marketing and how important that is, creating markets and really having that EQ and the IQ and coming up with some cool stuff. I really feel like the world, and you tell me if you agree or disagree, I feel like it's becoming much, much more entrepreneurial now. For almost the history of humankind, it's always been pretty entrepreneurial. You were a baker, I was a farmer, or whatever we were, a hunter-gatherer, it doesn't matter. Trade things, all that. And then we kind of got in that industrial revolution, and then was the big conglomerates. And I think we still see, obviously, some of that going forward, but I think we're seeing with the gig economy, with globalization, we're seeing much, much more entrepreneurship. Do you feel like that is the trend going forward globally?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, long past the days when people wanted to go get a business school education and run off to Wall Street to become an investment banker. I think nowadays people want to do something maybe in fintech or something entrepreneurial, especially in technology. And they want to do something with, a clear mission of doing something that's also good, right? So this social entrepreneurial aspect, I think, is the trend of the future.
Interesting.
And, people are more self-aware in terms of how their businesses are affecting the environment, I think. So, they're a little bit more thoughtful. It's not like I just want to make a lot of money. It's like, how do I make money but also solve some real world problems and leave this place in a better situation than when I came to, right? And so, like, for example, I think in the 1990s there was about 8,000 publicly traded companies, and now there's only about 4,000 publicly traded companies.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a really shocking statistic. But I think a lot of people are creating more private companies and staying private. I think to an extent there is there's an argument to be made that some of the public companies are over-regulated, but I also think that people are starting to understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur. There are a lot of help videos online. They see their friends doing stuff like that, and then also there's another trend to start investing locally, right?
Yeah.
So there's the Baltimore Angels, and there's a lot of angel clubs that are investing locally in their ecosystem. It's not just in Silicon Valley anymore.
No. And that was the whole raison d'etre, if you will, and that my French is is not the best. I took some years of it, but the accent's maybe not the best. But for America's venture capital is that, hey, let's export what Silicon Valley has done. Obviously, my time and experience there, at some really high levels. And I think the time is right. And then it's not that I'm the only one or anything like that, but I think that the time is right for that. And I think this is a particular market that lends itself to that. There's definitely challenges here because, government and politics are always going to be the biggest game in town or the region, but I think there's a lot of space for this, and there's a lot of potential here for Hopkins because, again, Hopkins has such great research. I think it's some crazy stat like 20% or 25% of all government funding for healthcare runs through Johns Hopkins, which is insane. So how do you sort of, get that entrepreneurship going? But I think there's like Miami, South Florida is really popping, Austin, there's all kinds of other places globally. We know there's all kinds of other places, Singapore and Israel, Tel Aviv, all kinds of other places that are doing it too. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about this. So two parts. How competitive do you feel the U.S. is right now with that whole milieu of everything you talked about? Hardcore technology, advancement, government, political, economic climate, and then this whole CSR thing. That's part one. Then part two is what areas do you think are especially hot right now for the next 5 or 10 years? Is it fintech? Is it AI? Where we need to be looking at? If I'm someone that's in business school and wants to start a company, where are the hot zones?
Absolutely. Those are great questions. So I'm going to sort of take that apart slowly. It's a combination of sort of policy and, is your economy or state or even city or region friendly to entrepreneurs? So what I would do is, instead of saying Control Alt Delete, we use the word reimagine. So I would reimagine sort of the Baltimore, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and I would say something like this. how interesting would it be if our policies were such that we encourage entrepreneurship, especially on the high-end technology side? I mean, how exciting would it be if we said, hey, world, send us your smartest folks because we want to educate them, and then we want to keep them here because we want to fund them, because we want to be a leader, whether it's AI or machine learning or blockchains, whatever it may be. How exciting would that be, right? I still think America is the greatest country to live in right now, because there's a lot of diversity of opinions. People are, you can say whatever you want to say to an extent, but there's also, if John and I don't agree with something, that's fine. We'll talk it out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's important because you need this level of being transparent and communicating. What I would love to see is a city sort of set itself up as a sandbox for blockchain technology, right? And say, hey, come over here. As long as you're registered, as long as you're showing us what you're doing, as long as you're not doing something illegal or misrepresenting your business, we understand 9 out of 10 times businesses fail, not because the founders or owners did anything illegal, just because it's really hard to start a business. But nonetheless, we're going to let you, experiment and try different things out. I do think that the U.S. has to come and become the leader in the AI technology and entrepreneurship, and also in the other emerging technologies. And I do believe that in this area, D.C., Baltimore, sort of Virginia, Maryland, right, we have the human capital talent to pull that off. So the question is, can we reimagine regulations so that, there's less of a burden and we encourage entrepreneurships? The other thing is, like if you're an entrepreneur and you need to tap into some money because you want to grow fast, who do you talk to? So encouraging that ecosystem through American venture capital is exactly the right thing to do in this area, right? Can we do Silicon Valley here? I think we can do like 10 times better than Silicon Valley if we reimagine everything. And
we got to reimagine everything. That's a heavy lift. I don't know about that.
But think about this, though, John. How much data is down there in D.C.?
No.
Then think about this. How many wonderful institutions are down around this area, right? And we have a tremendous amount of talent in terms of engineers, but how many people want to come here into, America and, immigrate? My parents immigrated here, right? And at that particular time, it was the American dream. Can we reimagine this American dream for everybody? I would love to get the best and the brightest here and have them stay here. What I see as an academic, people come over here, the smart people come, and then they leave. They go either Silicon Valley or New York City, or they go abroad, right? It would be wonderful if we could keep them here, fund their investment, fund their startups, and then encourage them to continue to innovate, right? And build a really nice ecosystem so that, I know that anyone who contacts you through your Rolodex, you could put them in front of any VC or, service provider that
pretty much
that they need, right?
Yep.
So I think that we gotta continue to build on that. We gotta continue to nurture that that culture, and it's like a cultural thing, right?
Well, absolutely, and I think that was when we were talking and stuff, and you found out what my background was, who I was, and that you can speak for yourself, but I think that you got pretty excited about that because you've been trying to do the entrepreneurial thing and whatnot like that, and we had some conversations. And what did I say? I said, this is what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do this before I came to Hopkins. Part of me choosing Hopkins, one, I had to come here because of my wife, and she was doing the MPH and MBA, and this is the absolute global leader for MPH, and she's a doctor from Israel trying to get medical residency, blah, 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 and all that type of stuff. And gosh willing, crossing all fingers and toes that that's going to happen because she's a brilliant doctor. Anyway, I'm not here to sell my wife or anything like that, and hopefully at some point she'll actually come on the show and we can talk about stuff, but who knows? She'd be amazing if she actually come on the show, but it's going to be hard to drag her on the show. I already know that. But anyway, not to get distracted, what we discussed, what I told you, which I learned from the best of the best in Silicon Valley, is it is all about the deal flow. That is the end all be all of everything. It's almost like Dune and the spice and all that type of stuff. And so that's what America's Venture Capital, doing a conference and getting people there and getting deal flow and getting people excited about it. And then you go out there and again connecting the capital and building an ecosystem. There's no doubt this is a massive area that has massive potential, absolutely. And just as South Florida, I am super bullish on South Florida, and that's one of the reasons, as I talked about, I want to get hooked up with this show and ownership and everything like that. I've got big plans on that. But to you and what you brought up there, and that's another show we got to talk about. But we have about 4 or 5 more minutes left in this segment. I know you got to go to something else, and I'm going to do the next hour with some other stuff. How worried are you? And again, if you don't want to touch on certain things, that's fine. But I really feel at this point that I hope anyway, the days of major armed conflict are over. But the days of technological conflict, cyber warfare, economic conflict have really just started ramping up. How concerned, we just inked a deal, part 1 with China. Some people have said that China is actually taking the lead in AI, potentially robotics in Japan, stuff like that. How concerned are you that we are falling behind in those areas, and what implications does that have?
That's a very, very interesting and a difficult question, but I think the following we should sort of be aware of, right? There's this really advanced machine learning AI algorithm called GANs, Generative Adversarial Networks, and what it says is that whenever there's sort of two parties, right, and they're trying to compete against each other, the generator and the discriminator, you can actually get to the results pretty quickly. And it's actually good to have the yin and the yang, right? So we have the US and we have China right now, and they're fighting each other, to try to gain dominance in AI, and whether it's quantum computers and other technologies. But ultimately, I think what's happening is that we're having a lot of activity in both countries, and we're going to advance this technology very quickly.
Okay.
And I think this is actually going to benefit society. And I sort of am a hopeful professor, and I think if we get to the point where we hit the singularity, someone's going to hit it, right? It may not be US or China, it might be Canada, who knows?
Explain singularity quickly.
So singularity is a point in time when everything changes, where we get an AI to be smarter than a human being, right?
Got it.
So when a computer starts to become smarter than human being, luckily the computer doesn't forget. We sometimes forget, right? I mean, if I go in the morning and yell at my wife or she yells at me, sometimes we can forget and forgive, right? Whereas a machine doesn't, right? And so this is a really dangerous point, because a machine's not going to forget, and it's going to grow smarter and smarter exponentially and surpass human beings, our abilities. But when we reach that point, right, and I think we will actually in our lifetimes, surprisingly enough, we're going to have to team up with our adversary, whether that's China or whoever it may be, in order to control this, because at threat is going to be the humanity of the world. And
Right.
I think that's when we all come together and say, okay, show me what you have, show me what we have. We have to work together or we're all gone, right? And so, I kind of believe, and I'm hopeful in that, and I think that we are approaching that, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, but we'll see something of that that will occur.
So I'm like you, I'm an optimist and everything like that. We got about 2 minutes, so I gotta be real quick with this. Do you worry about the Terminator type of scenario? Do you think once the computers can think for themselves and they're smarter than us, do we lose control? Are humans at threat? What does that look like quickly in like a minute and a half?
Absolutely. So if I had to look in the crystal ball, and it's always dangerous to forecast the future, but if I had to sort of speculate how we can control this thing, and it's going to be along the lines where a human being, us, and an AI are sort of combined, and that extra ability of the human and the top AI is going to defeat the AI. So a human being and an AI is going to defeat the AI.
Cyborg.
So, that's what I think. So I'm not so worried about it, I mean, our desire to stay alive and live as a race is very, very powerful, and we can become very, very creative. And I think if we couple ourselves, a little bit what Elon Musk talks about, that's how we can control it.
Very, very interesting. No doubt about it. Well, I really appreciate having you on. It was great having you on. Obviously, we'll have you on, definitely more, scheduling, permitting, and stuff like that, because there's so many different things we can talk about. That's what I love about you. You're very dynamic. You bring a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot of different hats, a lot of different experiences, and you get very engaged out there in the real world. You're doing it, you're living it, you're also being an academic, so that's really awesome. Definitely appreciate that. In the next hour, we're going to talk to someone who's actually from Syria here. We're going to talk about Syria, we're going to talk about politics, we're going to talk about all of that. You're listening to the John D. Villarreal Radio Show on 1210 AM Miami, the man, the only radio station where you are the man. Be back next hour.